Hype is so nuanced right now. I feel like everyone is overcomplicating and making it seem like we should be doing hours of cardio on top of a lifting routine. What is a good amount of cardio for a healthy, active individual who lifts 4 to 5 times per week and gets 10K steps daily? Do the zones really matter? We will be diving into this and so much more. Cardio. Let's dive in. There's lots of cardio questions this week, which I'm excited about. This question or this poster had a couple other questions under it that we can dive into also. So let's take it from the top. Is it a cardio hype? And what is like the recommendation for a healthy, active individual who's already lifting 4 to 5 times per week, gets 10K steps per day? Do they have to do additional cardio? And do the zones of cardio matter? I say yes.
Yeah.
You should be doing additional cardio. Josh?
Yeah, I definitely notice a difference in because I'm not the cardio queen, and I never have been. I was the guy who made excuse. No, I said queen on purpose. It was a joke. I was the guy who made excuses. Oh, I'm lifting enough. It's gonna hamper gains, whatever. I will say, since coming back full circle, like post athlete days, there's a massive difference in how I feel. It's played a big role in my recovery process, in becoming a human again, feeling good again, just doing. And I don't do a lot. Like when I was easing back into it, it was like a 15-minute session, 2 or 3 days a week. I've been more consistent with about 20-minute sessions, 3 days a week. Not in the last month, but pre-launch of all this craziness going on our side. And I notice a difference. I feel a difference for when I'm lifting just throughout the day. From a lifting standpoint, just not getting winded on squats is a huge point when you're doing some cardio. So if you need something to say, how is this going to help my lifting? Okay, well, you're not going to get winded. You can actually go to like muscular exhaustion versus being fatigued cardiovascular wise. But it helps with everything. It helps with my mood. It helps with my energy levels. I notice I'm more vascular. Obviously, as you're improving your heart health, it's going to improve vascularity. So I am not neglecting cardio because I am still in the sauna usually 6 days a week. So I am still getting a benefit there. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm not going out for the run, and I really enjoy the sauna. But I know that's not accessible for everybody. But long story short, this is something that should be in addition to lifting, even if it's minimal. Like, I love that a lot of these people said they're moving 8,000 steps, 10,000 steps a day. I love that they're training 4 to 6 days a week. Can you get out for one run? Can you get out for one bike ride? Get on a Peloton, stationary bike, whatever that is. You don't have to overcomplicate it. It really doesn't matter, in my opinion, what you're doing, as long as you're getting your heart rate up for that sustained period of time. Ideally a few days a week. But if it's once for right now, that's all you can do. Start with that and build on it. Just like we talk about with all habits, get it in, be consistent, and then build upon it from that point.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to get technical, the ACSM guidelines, which is American College of Sports Medicine, will advise like how much strength training someone should do per week, how much cardio we should do per week. And so the ACSM guidelines say 30 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity 5 days a week, or at least 20 minutes 3 days a week of vigorous high intensity exercise. So granted, if you are listening to this and you are strength training multiple days a week and you are, walking 10,000 steps, I read these and I'm like, this is for the average individual who also already isn't moving their body. Like the three of us don't do cardio 5 days a week. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying, I think these recommendations don't take into account necessarily like the already active person. But I noticed that there was another piece of that question about zones. Like, do the zones really matter? Because I think zone 2 is like such a huge thing right now. Personally, I don't feel that the zones matter all that much. If you were training for a marathon and trying to be really, really intentional about fast runs, slow runs, threshold runs, working on training your lactic threshold, like all of these like smaller context and nuanced details of run training, then I would say, yeah, it's probably helpful to pay attention to when you're in zone 1, when you're in zone 2, et cetera, which, by the way, all of those zones are relative to you and your own max heart rate, but we could get into that later. I would say for the average person who is just like, how should I, or this person who asked about, I'm already lifting multiple days a week, getting 10,000 steps in. Where do I start with my cardio? I would say start with, like Josh said, 1 to 2 sessions a week. Maybe that's 15 minutes. Maybe it's 20 minutes. Maybe you work yourself up to 30 minutes. And if you're enjoying it and it feels good, great, do more. But I wouldn't be hyper focused on the zones specifically.
Yeah, I agree. And I just to add to what you said, Joelle, I think that when you're thinking about the intensity of the cardio that you're going to implement, a good kind of just general recommendation is if you're going to do less sessions per week, make those sessions a little bit more high intensity. Yep. And if you're going to do 3 to 5 sessions per week, those can be lower intensity. But you're right, people who are lifting, walking a lot, you're getting some cardio benefits from that. So these health guidelines, because that's what they are, the ACSM guidelines are for overall health, right, is really speaking to those who aren't doing anything right now. It's assuming that those people are doing nothing. So start where you are. It's definitely important. A couple of the other questions under that question are just people going back and forth, saying that what type of exercise counts as cardio. So we kind of touched on that. This person does lots of walking, but she doesn't love running. Listen, you don't need to run. Running is one form of cardio. Mm-hmm. Yes, you see that all over social media right now. Running is having its moment. That's great. I think it's a great thing that a lot of people are doing to get active. But you don't have to run as your cardio if you don't enjoy it. So understand that if someone's telling you to go run and to do all these different types of zone 2 runs, that's just their opinion and their preference. It's not something you have to do. Find a modality that makes sense for your life and is something that you find enjoyable and stick with that. It doesn't have to be running.
I want to connect that real quick just back to the zones for a second, because I think even for those who aren't training for a specific run or race, but just to that point, they don't enjoy running. They don't enjoy the cardio that they're doing. One point of emphasis to kind of think about is that when you are consistently running, let's say you're brand new to it and you're in, say, zone 4, and it's just your heart rate's always up, you're barely moving, and it's just very frustrating. It can be beneficial to pay attention to your heart rate zones. Focus on keeping it in, or close to a zone 2, where let's say you're running for 2 minutes and your heart rate spikes. You can take that to a walk. So you're going run, walk, run, walk, run, walk. That's going to build your cardio capacity, because if you're doing this for weeks and weeks and you're grinding through it, it's not getting any easier and you're just frustrated with it, you're probably not going to stick with it. So if you can pay attention to it, even though you're not an endurance athlete, you pay attention to keeping your heart rate down actually during that run. That's how you're actually going to see a benefit or an improvement in your heart rate coming down over time. It's not just this constant exertion, not to say it won't when it's higher, but just being more efficient with it, on top of the fact that it's going to be more enjoyable. So as I was getting into this, again, I don't want to say anti-cardio, not enjoyer of running. This was midsummer. It was super hot, and I'm paying attention to my heart rate on a run, and I'm barely going, and it's at 135, touching 140. So as I start creeping up into the mid 140s, 150s, I'm like, well, I don't feel like I need to walk. I could probably tough this out, but I'm going to walk. I'm going to keep it in zone 2. Let's see how this goes. So I did just general spurts of this walk, run, and it was actually pretty enjoyable. My heart rate never got too high. I was never uncomfortable. Even though it's hot out, it was just enjoyable to be, kind of taking a stroll and being in this zone 2, and it's effective, but I'm walking. It did make the process more enjoyable, and I did notice an improvement where I was able to run longer for that, keeping my heart rate down. So seeing that actual improvement. So for those of you who are really not enjoying it, it's probably pretty hard. You're probably spiking into a higher zone. So that can be a strategy you implement, is that walk run. And it's not a waste. You're still in that heart rate zone, even though you're walking for a few minutes to bring your heart rate back down to that level. So just one point to keep in mind.
Granted, part of improving cardiovascularly is getting into that uncomfortable zone. So for instance, Josh, you're making a great point about, walk versus run. You're not saying just walk. No. You're saying walk, run, and kind of taking almost an interval approach to letting your heart rate come up and then letting it come back down, letting your heart rate come up, letting it come back down. Because what I do want to point out is that walking can be zone 2 for some people. If you are sedentary or you are, very out of weight or overweight or detrained or untrained, it's possible that walking puts you in a zone 2. And so if you're not currently walking at all, like, I don't think you need to start running. I think you could just start walking, and then eventually take that into the walk run situation until then you could get into, full runs, or not runs, but I just mean cardio as a whole. But I feel you on the hating running.
It's the worst.
Wouldn't be me. That is why I got a Peloton. But before I had the Peloton, I'd be on the Stairmaster. I love the Stairmaster. Run? No. Stairmaster, I could do that.
Even a ruck. Like, if you guys can get a weighted pack, like, you can get into that, whatever. You can elevate your heart rate walking by adding resistance that way, throwing some weight on your back or on your chest or wherever you're putting it. So different modalities, pick your favorite.
And just one other point here that I see in the comments under this question. She went on to say that she's been walking and lifting for years and her physique is fine, but now she feels like she's not doing enough based on the current cardio content. So we kind of touched on this in the last episode. 2 points here. Not everything you see on social media needs to be for you. So kind of just remind yourself as maybe you're following a lot of running influencers or people who are posting all this very high intensity cardio stuff. Not every post is for you, and that's okay. But when it comes to your physique, I think this is kind of the switch that we're seeing in the fitness industry. People used to be so anti-cardio and tell you things like, oh, you don't need to do cardio to change how your body looks and to get a physique in this peak state that you're striving to get. That's true. But we want to do cardio for our health, for our heart health. There are other benefits to it. So it's not just about changing how your body looks. It's still important to do on top of the other things that you're doing as well. So I just wanted to touch on that. All right, coach macro apps. Examples of being Macro Factor, Carbon Diet Coach. Are they accurate? Are they worth it? I'm looking for something to keep me accountable, and one-on-one is not something I can afford at the moment. What do you guys think? I haven't personally used either of these.
I was just going to say I can't really speak to their effectiveness.
But from a general sense, they're just using calculations based on your input. So
yeah,
if you're, I assume, especially Macro Factor, they've gotten great reviews. Jeff Nippert is a pro's pro. I assume it's taking into account exactly how you're responding, and it's going to just give you a mathematical equation to lose this amount based on your history. You're going to, drop it to this. I'm not sure if it's going to manipulate the ratios of macros for you. I'm sure you can, drag a slider or something. Most of the apps are doing that as well. So it's a nice starting point if that's what you can afford. Like, nothing against those. It's a different arena from coaching, obviously. There's not going to be that personalization factor. There's not going to be the intuitive cues. They're not getting the different coaching points, obviously, that you're getting from working with a human. But again, if you're responding very well, if you feel good, that's going to be something to monitor, because that's probably going to be the biggest drawback of working with an AI, with a machine learning component versus working with a human. Maintaining biofeedback, feeling well throughout the process, being able to understand, hey, something doesn't feel right. I've been feeling down for a while, but I am responding well, because that's all that it's computing is, are you recovering enough? And are you getting closer towards your goal as efficiently as possible? So just some things to keep in mind when you're not working with a human is, obviously the machine is there to drive you towards a goal. So you are going to be the one who has to step in and say, all right, it's time for a maintenance break. It's time to take a step back. I'm not thriving right now, even though I'm moving towards that goal.
I feel like those apps are the modern day of what RP templates used to be. I don't know if you guys use the RP macro templates. I toyed with them back in the day. And listen, they work. It's a great starting point. But like Josh said, it's not going to factor in. I mean, I don't assume it's factoring biofeedback. If you had a shit week or had we're sick with the kids or all these life things that we're talking about that definitely impact your adherence, your consistency, what's happening progress wise. So keep that in mind. Just use it as a starting point and make sure you're still factoring in all of those other things, because it could lead you down a slippery slope, I think, if you're just so hard pressed into following what it recommends.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is, keeping in mind, and I know she said like one-on-one isn't in the cards right now, which is totally fine. We're not going to sit here and try and sell you on one-on-one. But just the thing that I would keep in mind, sort of echoing both what Josh and Alessandra said, is something like Carbon Diet Coach, that's Lane Norton's, and Macro Factor Jeff's. They're going to essentially take in quantitative data, numbers, what your scale weights were for those 7 days. Did your weight come down? No? Okay, great. We'll lower macros. What it's not looking at is that qualitative data of like, well, why did your weight fluctuate this week? Or what was going on? Did your sleep suffer? Was your stress really high? And so maybe if that's, if a system or a coach knew that context, they wouldn't necessarily say, okay, we're going to lower your macros because your weight didn't move last week. So that's just something I would keep in mind. It's almost like, I agree with Josh, it's a great starting point. And I would say it's probably fairly accurate and could be fairly helpful, depending on the season of life that you're in and how much additional context you would potentially want it to know. But also maybe there are check boxes for those things of like, if you had a high stress week, like none of us have been in it, so I can't speak to that part. But I think it's, it could possibly be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, from a theoretical standpoint, like it will be extremely accurate numerically, but it's all those other things that it's not taking into account. So just take that with a grain of salt and, be the advocate for yourself.
You're a human. You're a human, not a robot.
Right.
All right. Next question is from Lindsay Alexander. She's an OG client. She's been with us for like literally 10 years.
Back when I was still coaching.
She asked, for resting between sets, especially with lower body when you're lifting heavy, sometimes my heart rate gets up into the 160s, 170s. It doesn't come back down quickly within 60 seconds of rest before my next set. I feel fine and I still push myself, but does this mean I'm not recovering well or recovering enough? Is this okay? I think this is a common struggle for a lot of people. Cardio will help with this, implementing cardio, as we touched on in the first question. But it's also okay to rest longer. If you need longer rest between sets, especially for like those heavy compound lifts, squats, deadlifts, bench, it's okay to rest longer. Like I think back to my powerlifting days, there were times where I was resting like 4 minutes between sets just to make sure I was feeling fresh and ready to really tackle that next set and not limit strength at all. So I would say it sort of depends on your goal, but in my opinion, it's totally fine to rest for as long as you need to. Just know that it's going to make the whole workout longer if you're adding more rest in, obviously.
Yeah, even bumping that to 90 seconds and then like, don't start this immediately after. Let's say your heart rate's racing and you jump in with a breathing technique, but settle it down a little bit and then jump in with like 30 seconds of box breathing and see if you can just focus intentionally on bringing that down a little bit further so that maybe you don't need to rest for 3-4 minutes between those sets.
Yeah, I was just going to say with those heavier compound lifts, I would say 90 seconds to 2 minutes should roughly be your rest period. 60 is pretty short for a heavy compound lift.
And she does the app right now. I typically program like, because we have rest time programmed in the app at 60 seconds, but based on the data, based on the research, it's really not going to make a huge difference as far as if you're resting 60 seconds versus 120 seconds. So do what you need to do and what feels best for you.
I just want to hit on that real quick. If you are using the app, for those of you listening who are regular members, the majority of the exercises are programmed at 60 seconds. So keep in mind, that is with like the busy human element in mind, it's really a minimum. Like give yourself 60 seconds. And even I say minimum, even sometimes I turn those into supersets or trisets or giant sets if I have to cruise through and jump into a meeting. So take that with a grain of salt. But ideally give yourself 60 seconds between those straight sets at a minimum. And then if it is a heavier compound, like you can take more. This isn't a one-on-one program. This is built for the masses, and that rest time is built with the masses in mind. So if you need 90 seconds, if you need 2 minutes, it's not detrimental. It just means it's going to take you longer to get through.
Yep.
Patients asked us, currently I'm lifting and I have a step goal of 8,500. I've lost 47 pounds. I still have around 35-ish more I would like to lose. My question is, do I need to incorporate more cardio? I should have read this before I read it out loud. Yes. I mean, as far as weight loss, technically, no. Is it going to be a little bit helpful? Yes. But as we talked about, you should be doing some type of cardio, even just once per week to start to focus on your overall health.
I lost that question. Did it say more cardio or cardio?
No, it says I've lost 47 pounds and I still have 35-ish more I'd like to lose. Do I need to incorporate more cardio than her 8,500 steps? I hate cardio, by the way. I would say from a fat loss standpoint, if you are like cruising and you are just consistently losing that week without cardio, then what Alessandra said, like, it's not that you necessarily need it from a caloric expenditure weight loss
Right.
purpose. More so, hey, we should be doing some level of baseline cardio beyond steps and having these bouts of consistent rhythmic activity that increase your heart rate for, a relatively extended period of time, just for the cardiovascular benefits.
Yeah, so a little vague on if those 8,500 steps include like a 15-minute run or cycle or anything like that. So you're obviously doing great. Like from a journey standpoint, keep kicking ass. If it's still efficient, like you don't have to change a thing from a weight loss perspective. But if that doesn't include cardio, get a day in a week just for cardiovascular benefits.
Also, like 47 pounds is incredible. So congrats.
Absolutely amazing.
Katie said, recovery, soreness preventing injury. I saw something about foam rolling and was curious as to why you all say it isn't necessary. I love to roll out with a lacrosse ball, but I want to know better ways. Even with warming up and stretching, I'm sore and I feel old. And someone piggybacked off her question and said recovery is such a balancing act for her. She knows everyone is different. Foam rolling doesn't even touch her issues. Is it normal to require physio and massage so often? I have tight hips, sore knees, shoulder pain. Does it get better? My, I guess, sort of unpopular maybe opinion here is that continuing to focus on progressive overload, strength training, putting more muscle mass on while working those end range of motions is going to be super helpful when it comes to mobility and like helping your body feel better as far as like the sore knees, shoulder pain and all that. But as far as like soreness recovery in general, the two big rocks with that is sleep and eating enough food. So if you're not fueling optimally with nutrition and you're not sleeping well, you're not recovering well, and that's probably why you don't feel great.
I have talked about this quite a bit on social media because the biggest myth that was floating around for a long time was people's need to roll out the lactic acid so that they wouldn't get sore. Roll out the lactic acid. And this is like, just as an exercise science buff, this is like my biggest hatred of a myth. So let's talk about briefly just what foam rolling can do and what it cannot do. So foam rolling cannot break up scar tissue, right? That's something I hear all the time. There is force that applied from foam rolling, but it's not enough to sufficiently, let's say, break up scar tissue. It cannot permanently increase flexibility. It has been shown to have some temporary increases in flexibility and range of motion, meaning it could be a good thing to potentially include in a warm-up, but the effects, the flexibility effects are temporary. They're short-lived. It doesn't affect flexibility long-term. And it cannot really reduce DOMS or that soreness that you're feeling, a day or two after your workout, that delayed onset muscle soreness. It might, and this is where people are like, but it makes me feel better. And if it makes you feel better, we'll get into this. Like, you can keep doing it. The thing is, it might provide a slight reduction in your perception of soreness, primarily because its effects on the nervous system, but it doesn't actually alter the underlying structure of the muscle or the muscle recovery process. So again, it might help your perception of soreness, but it's not actually affecting the muscle or changing the recovery process. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. Is it going to hurt your recovery or your performance? Probably not. But the temporary benefits like increased range of motion or reduced perception of muscle soreness, it's more so due to the neuromuscular function and the neuromuscular effects of the foam rolling than it is on like the effects of the muscle tissue itself, if that makes sense.
So I will speak as a person who's made of cement. I have done all the things. I have prayed to the gods of flexibility and mobility and the Ramwad gods, and very limited progress. I have done the foam rolling. I have done the deep tissue. I've done the Graston, and that was a question I want to circle back to you, Joelle. But the one thing that finally got me moving in the right direction, and this is, 10 minutes a day of static stretching before bed. None of this is useful for me. Actually incorporating and getting a little boring with my training technique. I say boring. My training technique is boring anyway, but utilizing some repetitive movements throughout almost every single training program I put together. So I'm including RDLs basically every single training block. I'm including Cossack squats basically every single training block. If I'm not doing something like bench dips, it's a part of my warm up, and I'll like use that to do something like pre-shoulder, pre-chest workout, going through the range of motion, extending that throughout, adding weight, and then holding it like when I'm done with the workout. So maybe finishing with a couple minutes, but actually stretching, going through that full range of motion with optimal form under load and progressing in that load. That's the one thing I've seen, and I'm not great by any means at this point, but I've seen some progress with that, consistently going through that full range of motion. Circling back to everything you guys just hit on, agree with 1,000%. Foam rolling or lacrosse ball pre-workout, maybe that opens it up a little bit for you so you can actually go through full range of motion without that pain. Like that's helped me. Again, not lasting benefits, but for that short period before that set, before that exercise, sneak that in there. Especially like if I foam roll my hamstrings, for example, if I roll on the barbell, my knees don't get as tight and they don't feel as pressurized as I'm going through squats on occasion. Circling back to Graston, Joelle, that was something that I had tried actually for an old ankle injury that may or may not have done anything. Now, that being a level up from something like foam rolling, has that actually been shown to break up any kind of scar tissue, or is even that still in the murky water?
I'm not incredibly well versed on that, to be honest. So I don't want to make up an answer for you. I haven't specifically looked into the efficacy of it. I would think it's fairly similar, but it is more. It's
like isolated more to
yeah,
one
that's
specific area.
That's the word I was thinking of, like direct or isolated. So it is more isolated, and you could probably get deeper into the tissue with that than something like a foam roller, which is like just much less isolated and less deep tissue, so to speak. But I'm not super sure of its efficacy, to be honest, Josh. I don't know how much of a difference it is from foam rolling, but gotcha. I can look into that and get back to you.
I want to hear the answer. For those unfamiliar, it's if you've heard of the scraping technique, basically taking this rounded blade and digging into one specific thing and being dragged out. This is not done on yourself. This is done with a specific practitioner who's trained in the Graston technique, but you walk out of the office looking like you got in a fight with a tiger.
Yeah, I've had it done on my neck because I've tried just about everything for my neck pain at this point. And I mean, I just left beat up. I don't know that it actually helped anything, but I don't want to speak on like, just because it didn't work for me, it doesn't mean it, whatever. It doesn't work for everyone, but
we'll have to ask some of our PT friends.
Yeah, we can ask.
Well, they probably do it, so it might be slightly biased.
Depends who you ask.
Yeah.
All right. Next question is from Julia. She said, what is the most basic nutrition plan to follow before adding on the more detailed aspects?
Carb, protein, color at every meal.
Yep. Agreed.
Fiber, protein.
We probably
color,
have
protein.
Like full episodes on this topic, I believe. Maybe we can do another full episode soon, but scroll back a little on the podcast. But at the very basic sense, protein intake, focus on making sure you're in the right range for what your goals are, what your body is at currently. Carb, color, whole foods, like start with just the basics. Don't worry too much about specific macros or anything like that. Okay, this question is from Melissa. She said, why do a lot of protein powder brands have a notice to California consumers about potential chemicals, including lead?
Yeah, the Prop 65 warning.
So it's called the Prop 65 law. This basically went into effect, I believe, in like the late 80s it was, but it was just something that required businesses to use this warning label on honestly anything
On
from
everything.
furniture to like if you went and bought a guitar to supplements, like anything you buy could have this label on it. It's not exclusive to just supplements. The intent behind it, I think, was good. It came with good intentions. The issue with it is that it doesn't distinguish between large and small risk, right? So it doesn't tell you like which chemical is harmful in this product or how much is it really harmful to the human population. Like it's just this very general warning that businesses are required to put on.
I remember there was an article way back basically stating every single protein powder you consume, it was a big three, I forgot the third, but lead and arsenic were in just about every single one, and it was like this big, it was a big thing for like a month.
I mean, you see it come up often in like baby food and like, whatever, we're getting off topic, but so just know it's a very general label that a lot of companies just are required by law to put on for California. With that, the supplement industry is highly unregulated. We know this. So it is extremely important that you choose a brand, a business, a company to purchase from that does third-party testing. Essentially, third-party testing is they send it out to a lab that is unaffiliated with them so that the lab can test the actual product and confirm, okay, this is what is actually in the product and it's what the label is saying is in the product. So that is number one. And number two, just make sure you're choosing supplements that have high quality ingredients. You're not taking a bunch of things like Jacked 3D or like, all those things that we used to take back in the day that really were not doing too much for us. So brand matters. We are huge fans of Legion here on the podcast. Yeah, that's my rant on supplements, but you don't have to be worried about it is really what the end rant sentence.
I wish somebody told me that meth was in Jack 3D back in the day.
Oh my God. I think about all the supplements that I used to
just without like any
without question
research,
like,
no question.
Pre-workout. Wow, I feel like I want to rip my face off. This is great.
I've never done cocaine, but man, that must have felt close.
Oh man. Yeah.
So that's the law. Don't worry about it. Don't stress over it. Choose a quality brand of supplements. Jennifer says cardiovascular fitness estimations, for example, VO2 max on various fitness wearables. Is there any legitimacy to them?
That's my girl, Jen. She's a client of mine. Shout out to Jen. I love you.
Shout out, Jen.
Also, shout out to Jen because she's a pediatric ICU physician and she's just such a freaking hero. So anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, like literal hero for our children. Anyway, okay, so love this question. And I know specifically that Jen is probably asking about Aura because I'm like 99.999. Actually, I'm 100% positive that she wears an Aura ring. And so my guess is when you're referring to wearables, you're talking about potentially VO2 max of your Aura ring, because I know there are cardiovascular age estimates now and VO2 max age estimates. So I would say that they are estimations, and that is definitely an estimation. It's not going to be as accurate as an in-lab test. The cool thing that I like that Aura does do, and maybe some other wearables do this too, but I know Aura gives you the option of doing a sub-maximal VO2 test, which is obviously way less like intensive and costly and is way more accessible than going and finding a lab or a university who would do an actual VO2 test on you. So you could do the sub-maximal test on Aura, which is basically like a low intensity cardio, like walking briskly. And I think they have it in there as like the 6-minute walk test. But basically with the submaximal test, they're looking at your heart rate. Then they're looking at, how high your heart rate is getting during that. And then they're also looking too at how quickly that heart rate is returning to baseline. And so a relatively low resting heart rate that returns quickly to baseline signifies typically a high VO2 max, and a high VO2 max is a good thing. And then, if it takes a while for you to get back to baseline, or your heart rate stays elevated for an extended period of time, that typically is indicative of a low VO2 max. So again, I think that it's probably a decent estimation. I'm like, exclamation, what words? I think it's probably a decent estimation. I think it would get even more decent if you did the submaximal test versus like mine gives me a cardiovascular age and VO2 max number right now without me having ever done the submax test. So I would say doing the submax test would make it more accurate. But ultimately the goal is to improve your VO2 max with more cardio. So hopefully that answers your question. I think that it's a valuable tool that will improve in time with cardio. But it's an estimation, and it's not going to be as accurate as a lab test, but it's a place to start.
Another reference point.
Yeah, it's a place to start.
Sarah asked, can compound / more Olympic style training thicken your waistline versus more traditional bodybuilding style of weightlifting? I know nutrition plays a big role in all of this too. I currently follow Build and have been working out and lifting more powerlifting style for a long time, and the composition of my body is much more linebacker, for lack of a better term. But when I lifted more bodybuilding style, one body part per day, I didn't feel as bulked. I love this style of training. It makes me feel so damn strong, but sometimes I don't love how thick it makes me look. Is it just a matter of going through a cut, or can your style of training alter your body composition? My opinion here is that it probably is like body composition related, in the sense that nutrition needs to be manipulated a little bit. I think the whole like Olympic lifting thickens your waistline thing is a myth that we have heard about for a long time. At least I remember hearing about it in my powerlifting days too. And as somebody who also has trained exclusively powerlifting, I will tell you that was like my leanest physique that I had. And that was because nutrition was like on freaking point during those years. So I will say it's probably just the need for you to go through a cut phase. I personally don't think you're going to see a huge shift as far as those certain exercises thickening your waist.
I'm going to disagree. This is why, I mean, everyone's individual, and for some people you may just respond differently to certain lifts, and just genetically, like what you're more predisposed to, quote unquote, bulk up quicker. Like what's your body part that gets stronger faster, builds muscle faster, whatever. When I do front squats, as I am staying lean, I do have more square abdomen, lower abs, obliques. They do come out, like I can literally see it, I can feel it. It's not fat. I get more square as opposed to a V every time I stick with front squats for a longer period of time. You can agree, disagree. I can show you pictures where it is literally the case.
I don't need to see pictures. I am probably the only person that sees your naked body on a daily basis.
I don't have to be naked.
I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I think. Okay.
So I would say I am more sensitive to that. Like, and I don't think it affects everybody. Obviously, it's going to be genetic. It is consistently when I have front squats done 2 to 3 months in a row that I notice a difference in my body.
It's very interesting to me that front squats is the exercise that you think is the golden ticket. That is not the exercise that I would have thought. I agree with both of you, for the record. I think that there is an exercise selection piece, and I also agree that there is likely a nutrition component. But I'm surprised to hear that front squats are the thing that you think changes the. I'm not telling you you're wrong. It's your body. You know it best, and Alessandra probably knows it pretty well too. But I usually when you hear about like a waist thickening,
You think like side bends or
yes, it's like the heavy oblique stuff, or even like you think about your lats, like the anatomy of your lats that come down literally from the top of your essentially the base of your shoulder all the way down the rest of your back. I could even see with more lat thickness that adding to overall like waist thickness in a sense. I could argue that. So front squats is that's very interesting.
I literally bought a hack squat machine for this reason. That is the reason we have a hack squat in the gym.
Like, that's why we got that.
That's why we have it.
It's news to me.
Yep.
I see, but I'll disagree with Joelle because I think the bigger you build up your lats and your upper back, the smaller your waist can appear too. So I think it is definitely a super individual thing here, and there are a lot of things at play. If you are enjoying the current programming, you feel strong, maybe it's worth tapping into nutrition and seeing if that moves the needle a little bit to improve your physique in the way that you want to.
The Three Musketeers don't always have to agree.
I just think whatever. I don't want to be a dead horse. I think there's validity to both. I think I think exercise selection could be playing a role and nutrition could be playing a role.
Darcy says, waking up in the middle of the night with very sore legs, almost Charlie horse-like pain, following the move program and going to suggested RPE during the first week of programs. It seems like the second or third week it backs off. What would you suggest? And then she went on to say that she drinks plenty of Element, 90 ounces. I'm assuming 90 ounces of water daily. I'm eating
hopefully
at least
90 ounces of Element.
Yeah, hopefully not.
A lot of salt.
She's eating 2,400 calories with a heavy focus on 150 to 180 grams of protein, active daily. Even on my rest days, I do yoga twice a week and the mobility warm-ups, walk for 10 minutes to get plenty warm before my lifts.
Maybe take another magnesium supplement before bed.
I was going to say that. If you're just having one element or even two per day, like I still take a magnesium supplement before bed, and that can be something that directly helps with like the Charlie horse like cramps if it's like that. If it's simply like soreness though, like she said, sore legs,
Those can be similar sensations.
I guess so. I don't know. To me, like I only get Charlie horses when I'm pregnant. I haven't gotten them this time, but I would wake up with like my calves like in a ball, like and it's painful. It's not really. I wouldn't compare it to like muscle soreness from a workout.
The pregnancy,
you know what I mean?
The pregnancy Charlie horses in your calves in the middle of the night are unlike anything I've ever experienced. I'm like, this is how I go. I'm not going to make it to 95. This is how I go.
Because you're like, you're frozen. Like you can't do anything about it.
You're like,
you
what do I
You
do?
feel paralyzed almost. And like Josh will be sleeping next to me and I don't want to wake him up. But I'm like, literally
I would get out of bed and try to stretch it. And Brant would wake up and be like, are you okay? What are you doing? Are you in labor? I'm like, Charlie horse. I do appreciate, Darcy, that you gave a ton of context in this question, because if you were just like, oh, I'm experiencing a lot of soreness, we'd be like, you're probably not eating enough. You probably need more protein. You know, maybe you're blah, blah, blah. And so I love that you're like, here's what I'm eating. Here's my protein. Like, here's all the things I'm doing right. I agree magnesium could be helpful. The other thing that I would just urge you to think about and that I don't know in relation to this question is specifically what your post-workout nutrition looks like, and potentially even your pre-workout nutrition. I have noticed personally, and I was actually just having this conversation a few weeks ago with that same client, Jen, who asked about the VO2 question. She was talking about some like pretty high soreness after workouts that was kind of lingering. And I know what she's eating and I know what she's drinking and I know how she's training. And so I had all of that context. And I shared this with her that I have noticed a difference in my soreness of if I drink a whey protein shake post-workout versus have a regular like meal with protein and carbs and whatever. And so now I almost always, 99% of the time, will have a whey shake with my breakfast or or post-workout or whatever with my other food items, because I find that specifically is something that helps my soreness levels. And so my client Jen, she introduced that. She's like, all right, I'm going to start doing a shake post-workout. And she's like, oh my God, it absolutely made a difference for my soreness. So I would just take another peek at your pre and post-workout nutrition, make sure that we're having enough protein surrounding those meals, and potentially swap in something like a whey protein supplement instead of chicken. I know in theory it shouldn't make a difference, right? If you're like 30 grams from a shake and 30 grams from chicken, but there's just different absorption, different bioavailability, different amino acid profile, maybe it will make that much of a difference.
Yeah, there's a bunch of little nuances you could kind of do a deep dive on. Like, does this happen specifically on lower body day where you also go for a run? It's cold now, so I doubt it's this, but are you sweating more, than you would expect? So maybe that 90 ounces needs to go even higher. Just little things like that. Take notes. Like, if it's not every day, is there any common denominator on these days where this happens at night?
It also could be, because this is the other interesting point I wanted to make. She mentioned that it usually backs off in the second or third week, which is normal. Like, it's very normal to be more sore in the beginning of a cycle when the exercises and the volume is a little bit more novelty. And then, as you kind of adapt and progressive overload is taking place, that soreness begins to dissipate. But the other possibility, as Josh is saying, kind of like collect data about when that's happening to see if you could find any trends, could also be where you are in your cycle. You might notice more soreness in, the latter half of your cycle in your luteal phase, and then less soreness in your follicular phase. I'm not telling you to adapt your training around that. I'm just saying it might be a pattern that you could potentially notice.
Jen asked what to do / how to fix if breathing heavy during lifting sets is what prevents you from going heavier / doing more reps. I feel like there are times where I could go heavier or should be doing more reps, but I'm gassed and I need a breather, but my actual muscles aren't tired yet.
Cardio
or longer rest longer
Both.
between sets. And then her second question asked about our thoughts on the at-home fitness scales that claim to measure body fat percentage, BMI, muscle mass, water retention, etc. Are they accurate or a scam? Thank you. Loving these longer podcasts. They make cardio more enjoyable. So you are doing cardio. So maybe you just need to do a little more cardio.
Maybe a little more.
Yeah, no, don't waste your money on those scales, please.
The smart scales, like I almost equate them, like I know people will go into gyms and they're like, oh, my gym did an in-body scan. That's using the same technology that those smart scales are using. They're using something called BIA, which is bioelectrical impedance analysis. But essentially what they're doing is, like, if you've ever done a handheld thing, or like the same thing, you step on the scale, what it's doing is, obviously you can't feel it, but it's sending an electrical current through your body, and it's trying to measure how much of that electrical current gets resisted when it's sent through your body, because different types of tissues in your body, like bone, muscle, fat, have different levels. This is what's actually kind of interesting, but they have different levels of electrical, like, conductivity, which is how it then makes those predictions. But the problem is things like hydration affect it, and things like body temperature affect it, and things like glycogen stores and the time of day and your menstrual cycle. And so it's highly, highly variable when it comes to those additional things. Your body weight is still going to be accurate on that scale. But for instance, if you're dehydrated, your body fat reading will overestimate. And so if you wake up and you are relatively dehydrated because you didn't drink for the last 12 hours or whatever, it's going to overestimate your body fat based on that. Now, if you're like, I'm going to hop on it once a week and I'm super consistent with my macros and super consistent with my water intake, the number itself might not be super accurate, but you could potentially track the trend of data over a few weeks. So generally speaking, those other metrics, body fat, etc., are not super reliable or accurate when it comes to body composition specifically. It's just a really large margin of error. And interestingly, the more overweight or obese someone is, the larger the margin of error, which I always think is interesting. So anyway, I wouldn't give those other measurements too much credit, but you could potentially at least track over time the trends, if that makes sense.
Agreed. All right. We don't have too many more. We could probably bang these out. All right. Jenna says, if I have a busy week or two coming up, is it okay to switch between the build and move programs just for a week or two? So, for example, she wants to do move after coming from build. So like 2 weeks at build, 2 weeks doing move. Or would you suggest sticking with the 4 days per week program, even if that means only getting to 3 of the days and continuing that into the next week? If you have a busy month coming up, which is honestly probably all of us, it's okay to just hop to move for the whole month. I would rather see you complete the full program for those 4 weeks rather than trying to combine the two or like skip a day of one. There's nothing wrong with doing less for a month. And you're probably going to, even though you're doing less days, you're going to be more consistent with that move program. That is going to help you progress more than cutting it short. So that's my advice. Yeah, that was the question.
I think there's also a psychological component when you just say, hey, I'm going to commit to 3 days a week and I'm not going to feel bad about it because this is what's going to work for me in this season of life. And every week you get that third session in and you're like, I crushed it. I did it. I finished my program this week, versus you choose the 4 day. And then 1 week you do the 3 day, 1 week you do the 4 day, but 1 week, then the next week you do the 3 day and you're bummed because you didn't get to do the 4th, versus having just the confidence to walk away from your week saying like, I completed my week of training. I would always rather see someone do less and feel good about it than commit to more, not be able to do it and feel like shit about it.
Preach. Joelle, you're going to like this one. Is all protein created equal? A while back, I was listening to a podcast about collagen being an incomplete protein, but I see people log it towards their protein goals all the time. It makes me question other protein labels. You have lots of posts on collagen, I feel like. Maybe not recently, but I remember you had a few good ones.
Luckily, I feel like that one has died a little. I haven't had to talk about it as much.
Until now.
Yes. I would say the biggest thing to keep in mind, first of all, like I have seen lots and lots of people swear by collagen anecdotally. Like, I saw a difference in my hair. I saw a difference in my skin. I saw a difference in my nail growth, or I saw a difference even in like joint pain. To that, like, this is one of those things where it's like, it's not going to harm you. So if you want to try it and you want to give it a go, have at it. The biggest thing that I would want someone to know, you're right, is that in that it is an incomplete protein, which means it's lacking the essential amino acids that we need to get from our food. Mainly, it's lacking some leucine, tryptophan, whatever. The biggest thing is that because it lacks leucine, let's say, compared to the amount that's in whey, it's not going to be a helpful protein supplement for muscle building, performance, recovery. And so that's the biggest thing that I would want you to keep in mind. Like you mentioned, you see people tracking it in their protein goals. You should still track it. It has calories. You should still track it. If you think about the protein in rice, or the protein in quinoa, or the protein in beans, like those are incomplete proteins. You don't negate the amount of protein that's in them if you're in your food tracking app. So it absolutely should still count. It just shouldn't be like your protein supplement. Like when I talked about adding in a post-workout whey scoop, collagen post-workout would not be an ideal source of protein to supplement with for like muscle building recovery purposes. But if you want to try it for other reasons, hair, skin, nails, joint health, try it. It's expensive. So it's one of the things that I would say, like, don't bother. But if you have the budget for it and you want to try it, I don't have a problem with someone trying it and seeing if they feel like they notice a difference.
Agreed. I've actually started taking it again. I used to take it years ago, and then I stopped for a while, and then we saw it at Costco and just picked it up and just testing it out to see if it impacts skin health this pregnancy, or like I took it with Kai's pregnancy and I didn't have quite as many stretch marks, for example, as Cora's. And that could totally be just like age related, or just like second pregnancy versus first pregnancy, but it's not going to harm me. I'm taking it to see if it helps with my skin, and that's that.
Right.
All right. I'm struggling to understand warm-up sets completely. Alessandra answered this in her Q&A a few days ago about what it would look like for her with deadlifts, and that helped a lot, but I'm not understanding if I should be doing warm-up sets for every exercise. Do you take a full rest, so for example 60 seconds, between warm-up sets, or are they more of like a quick, less rest kind of thing? I almost wish I could watch someone's full workout start to finish to see what it truly looks like. I don't rest fully between warm-up sets just because it's lighter weight.
Same.
It is a warm-up set. You don't need that full rest. And you don't have to do it for every exercise. I specifically do it for those that I'm lifting heavier on, like the compound lifts. Even like if I'm doing dumbbell rows, I might do one warm-up set just to like get into the flow of the movement. But you definitely don't need to do like 3 warm-up sets for every exercise because that can triple the time of your workout. So that's just my take. I know everybody kind of does it different. Do you guys differ there?
It's also something you want to make sure, like, there should be no reason to rest 60 seconds because it really should not be fatiguing. You're warming up, you're getting your nervous system ready for this movement, for this weight. We talked about it a few weeks ago. Like we were referencing Dr. Mike Israetel. I don't know if he's still doing it, but his last warm-up set would actually be a weight heavier than his first working set. And that was to kind of overprime his nervous system and to improve the efficiency of that first working set. So that's kind of an overextension of what we're talking about here. In the general sense, it's just getting you into the motion. It's waking up your nervous system for that lift. It's making that first set feel a little bit easier than jumping in there cold turkey. But the biggest take home for me is it should not be fatiguing whatsoever. That would be taking away from your actual working sets.
Yep. I agree
Last
with
question of the day. Ellie said, is consuming full fat food, probably mainly dairy, actually better for you than low fat or fat free? Would the same go for sugar/sugar free and sodium/reduced sodium? I was once told your body doesn't recognize the reduced products and therefore has a harder time processing. Would love your thoughts.
I don't know what that bullshit is about not recognizing the fat-free products or whatnot. So I would just omit that part. Whatever you heard there, I'm just going to say is not true. Yeah. What do you guys think? I mean, mostly I would say it is a preference thing above all else. I don't think that there's likely going to be a significant difference in your health, whether you do the fat-free version and then get your fats from another food versus the full fat version, and that's where you're getting your fats from.
No, I think the only part it gets a little weird is I think this was funky on cheese for a while. It was like fat-free cheese, but they were just like swapping in. It wasn't obviously real cheese. Like, how do you take all the fat out of cheese? I don't know. It's just the more you get into that, it's just more processed stuff. But as long as it's not something being added to it that doesn't need to be there, like in that regard to processing, I don't think it's a big deal if you're going from whole milk to 2%, for example.
I think it's more of an issue too of the calories involved when something is full fat versus reduced fat. Like if you look at a regular like whole milk yogurt, it's going to have like a decent amount more calories than the fat-free version, obviously, because fats are calorically dense. There's 9 calories per gram of fat. So if you take the zero fat, like look at skim milk versus whole milk. Skim milk is what, like 80 calories a cup. The whole milk I buy for my girls is 160 calories a cup. I think it's double the calories. So there's more so a caloric component of the full fat versus the non-fat, probably more than anything.
I think it just depends on the season of dieting and season of life that you're in. If you're in a caloric deficit and you want to save some calories in that regard and you find that helpful for adherence, go for it. I personally am team whole, full fat. I think it just tastes better. But then she brought up like sugar/sugar free, sodium.
Well, let's jump into the dairy part real quick, because the only like going from regular whole milk to like all the way down to skim, for example, there's going to be a less of a difference on that spectrum than talking raw. Like if you're talking about raw milk, raw yogurt, raw cheese, like there's a different process that happens within that as far as pasteurization. So there will be it's not a different substance, but you are consuming a different product when it's raw milk versus, no? You don't think that you're losing some of the benefits during the pasteurization process?
No.
Why not?
Personally, no. Do you know what the pasteurization process is?
Just heating up the milk.
They literally heat it for like, it's something so insignificant, like 9 seconds. They heat up the milk. They like blast, make it hot for 5 seconds, whatever it is. I'd have to look up the amount. And then they cool it back down. And that is just to kill any bacteria, pathogens, cow shit on the udders that came into the milk, so that we don't get sick from our milk. So
have they not done studies on like allergies in whole milk, or I'm sorry, in raw milk and things along those lines due to, you know, denaturized enzymes and things that happen? Even though it's a short burst, it's a very high heat for that period.
I will take clean milk over salmonella personally.
You're talking to the raw milk lover. You know that, right?
I know.
It's God's nectar. It's
Me
God's
and Josh
nectar. It's so good.
definitely we disagree on that.
Cold plunges in raw milk.
You will not.
Those are our two things.
What?
I've tried it. I will say it does taste good. Like
it is delightful.
It is delightful. I don't know that I would drink it like
You're making
cups.
faces. Have you had it? Have you, like, benefits aside, have you
I
drank
wouldn't
it?
be able to
you
get
didn't.
past the fact that it's filthy.
Well, I just think about the fact that one day when we have a farm and have a cow, I'm going to drink its milk.
She's going to be sucking that udder. Straight out of the teat.
Why do you have to
Straight-
cross the line?
Okay, how about
Straight
this?
out of the teat.
Can you get milk your cow? Okay, then just go like microwave it and then
If
let it
that's
cool
what
down.
you want to do, sure.
Or like boil it and then let it.
I don't think they're rolling in cow shit before they hook it up to these things and start filling up jugs of milk. I have to, for my sanity, I have to assume that these things are clean before they get connected.
We're going to have a whole episode about this.
Have you
'cause I
ever
think-
watched a cow get milked?
You haven't had raw milk. Why are you talking about watching cows get milked?
Go look up a YouTube video, just any random YouTube video of a cow getting milked. And you tell me that looks like a sanitary process.
I watched Ballerina Farm. Do you follow her?
Yes.
She's posted videos milking her cows.
Does it look sanitary to you?
So note to self, when Joelle comes to visit our farm, we're gonna have to warm up her milk for her.
Okay,
Well,
so what
my
about our
favorite
eggs?
too,
What about our
something
eggs straight
that
out
I
the
think-
chicken's ass? We're not scrubbing them with soap. Granted, they're in a shell. I understand that. It's a nice little wash down with water, warm water, wipe down. We eat it, and we've been doing that for years.
But it's all like, I don't know. I think that a lot of people have been led to believe that like with the pasteurization process, like all of these chemicals are getting added to your milk. Like there's no chemicals being added to your milk. It's not being like bleached or whatever. They're literally just heating it up and cooling it back down to kill any harmful bacteria in it.
So I don't think it's the argument of chemicals being added. I think it's what you're losing during that heating process. That's the main argument. And I'm not a raw milk nut. I'm not.
You actually haven't had it in a while.
No, only because they've made it so inconvenient to get, and it's very frustrating to me. I have to actually drive a couple towns over to get it.
You're gonna have trouble finding it now because there's a whole bird flu happening thing, and eggs are off the shelves in places, and raw milk. What was it? E. coli something.
We better start heating our chicken coop. They've been
there's all sorts of.
laying.
It's
All right, let's put that to rest for
Homesteading episode coming up.
now. Let's answer the sugar/sugar-free, sodium/reduced sodium. I feel like that's a different topic slightly. We've talked about this before. We try our best to try to buy foods that do not have added sugar, just because of how fast that can add up when you don't realize that. I don't even know what to give an example here, but like literally,
Well, it's in everything. You go to Whole Foods, for example. I know I'm buying it at Whole Foods. It's marketed as organic and healthy and for kids. And then you flip it over and there's 8 grams of added sugar. There's 7 grams of added sugar, which in and of itself doesn't seem like a whole lot. But when that's in everything that you give to your kid, it is not uncommon to have 100 added sugars at the end of the day because you don't realize how fast all these processed snacks adds up. So it's not to strictly demonize anything with added sugar in it. It's simply being aware, like it's in just about everything. So if we're not cognizant of prioritizing whole foods for our kids for the majority of their meals, and then giving them these snacks here and there, in that situation, it's not going to add up to 100 grams of added sugars per day, obviously. But it is, I hate to use the word normal. It's depressing to say, but it is the norm for these kids to have these highly processed snacks, and for that to sneak up on these people, on these parents who are trying to be, trying to make good choices. They see the box, they don't flip it around like, oh, this looks healthy, I want to do best for my kids. Unfortunately, we have to go a step further and actually tally these things up and see where we land, because it's snuck into everything. You don't want to demonize it. You don't want to make this an anxiety point, but it's something you have to be aware of. Just long-term health concerns, keeping that number down.
I also think it's helpful to differentiate between sugar and added sugar.
Very much.
Because you might have a product that has, I think of like yogurt pouches that we give our kids. That yogurt pouch might have 12 grams of sugar, but only 4 grams of it is added sugar. And it's like, okay.
Or zero.
Or no added sugar.
Those natural fruit rolls.
Yeah.
They
I just
have
found
those
at Whole
now.
Foods. They have you ever seen like is it Stony Brook Farms? Those
I just posted
pouches?
a story of Cora this morning having
Yeah,
hers.
so
They have them.
They now make a zero sugar one. And I was previously buying a different, like that brand, but just whatever their standard whole milk pouch is. And then I just saw the last time we were there that they have a zero added sugar option. And I was like, done, snatched those off the shelves. So yeah, it's more so paying attention to the added sugar and trying to limit that when possible.
Joelle, your pain point is the foam roll stuff. Mine is the adding sugars to fruit. Like, I don't know if you guys have been Costco. I know you guys have, but listeners, if you're Costco shoppers, there are 2 bags of dried mangoes directly next to each other. One bag is coated in sugar. The other bag is a straight mango.
We bought it by accident.
It was disgusting. It was so sweet. It tasted gross.
It was
I
like
hate
candy.
it. I spit it out.
Was so good. I made that mistake once, or like
Mango was already candy.
We got Costco delivered, and someone or whoever picked up our groceries got that one. And I was so salty about it at first, or sugary about it at first, because I was like, now I have this added sugar, blah, blah, blah. And then I ate it and I was like, this is so good. And now I don't want to go back to the unsweetened version because it was so much better. Even the texture was better.
It was like candy.
Yeah. The unsweetened one, sometimes you get like a hard piece, or like,
they're hard to
so
chew.
Inconsistent. You know what the good ones are. And then there are some not good ones. That sugar-coated one was so delicious.
It's like thick and juicy, and it just melts in your mouth.
So much better.
Anyway,
we're not helping. we're not
helping.
Convince you to not get the added sugar.
Don't get it, but it's so good.
Last point: sodium versus reduced sodium. I know we all love our element. A lot of people still feel sodium is terrible for you and are scared of it. Let's just kind of squash that provide some nuance there, because that matters too.
A big thing people don't think about with the sodium, and that it's just not common knowledge, is it's not the sodium itself. If you can balance it out, which you are balancing it out with something like an element in the right ratios, sodium is going to draw water into a cell versus potassium kind of bringing it extracellular. So having the correct balance is going to help prevent that additional blood volume. Now, jump in if I'm analyzing this improperly, Joelle, but having that balance and increasing your amount of sodium along with the potassium is going to help this actually become a cardiovascular issue.
Yeah, part of it is like, potassium related and not having enough potassium in relation to sodium. I think, look, obviously we are big fans of the salt and element in general. Do I think that some people don't need them? Yes. Do I think some people probably do need to watch their sodium intake? Yes. Not because, I don't mean that in like a fearful sense. It's more so your sodium needs, my point is that your sodium needs are absolutely higher when you are more active, when you are doing more cardio, when you are sweating more, when you
live in a warmer climate.
Yes, when you're in hot or humid climates, when you have low blood pressure. Like before element was a thing, I used to sprinkle pink salt, like a pink salt grinder, into my water every day because I have very low blood pressure. And if I don't have enough sodium, I will get like fainty and pass out. And so I've been adding salt to my water for years, and then Element came out and I was like, oh, this tastes a lot better than just straight ocean water. And so then, I started using Element, but there are specific instances where having high salt, higher salt intakes could be helpful. And I think that we've just been taught for so long that like sodium automatically equals high blood pressure. But I would say that that's also much, much more likely in an inactive population. Like we know
Also,
sodium is, yeah, go ahead.
If you're consuming, like if McDonald's is your dinner regularly, you probably don't need an electrolyte packet because a burger is going to have more than you needed for the entire day.
Well, and the other thing to that point, Josh, is most people, and I'm going to exclude our listeners from this because I'm going to assume that our listeners are already health and fitness enthusiasts in some capacity who are watching what they eat and are trying to move more and so on. When you take the average American who is not eating well, not moving, not eating fruits and vegetables, not having fiber, that person probably doesn't need to worry about the Element packet or having the extra sodium. And that person might actually benefit from choosing the low sodium option among their processed food choices. Now, first and foremost, I'd rather you just not choose the ultra processed food altogether, but the low sodium option could be helpful for that person. What I see happen in the fit-ish community is the majority of us are not getting a ton of sodium from our food unless we are directly adding it to our food, because the person who is eating mainly whole nutrient dense, one ingredient food sources, for dinner you're making chicken, sweet potato, and spinach, unless I am actively adding salt to those things, there's not a ton of naturally occurring sodium in those things. It's more so that the sodium creeps up in like the seasoning packets and the seasoning we use and the marinade we use and the dressings we use and blah, 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 blah. And then of course, if you're getting, like you said, Josh, a McDonald's meal or whatever else, that's obviously going to be really high sodium. So I think that we're also seeing this wave in the health and fitness community benefiting from the Element packets and the salt because they probably were having pretty low sodium levels. And as much as people fear high sodium levels, there's a detriment to having too little salt and sodium as well.
Yeah, I think that sums it up nicely. That was our last question. Another super long but hopefully helpful episode for you guys. As a reminder, we post, or Josh posts, in the Facebook group, usually on Mondays or Tuesdays because he gets the best questions for some reason. So
I appreciate you.
Maybe I'll throw my hat in the ring and see if anyone.
Let's see if Joelle gets them next week. But
there can only be one Highlander.
But if you're not in the Facebook group, that will be linked in the description. It's also linked in the app if you're in there. But thank you guys for participating, asking awesome questions. And
Yes.
Where can they find you?
I'm at Alessandra Skutnik.
I'm at Joelle Samantha.
I'm at Josh Skutnik.
We will see
And
you
if you've
in the
listened
next...
to 3 episodes, make sure
you
that
didn't
you
say
do
it.
the 3
I don't sound like
episodes.
that. I don't sound like that.
I can't imitate your voice. It's too deep for me. My
If
body
you
isn't-
are still listening after the 3rd episode, our rule is that you please leave us a review. Helps us expand the audience, and you probably got something helpful, and it's going to help somebody else. And I don't sound like this when I talk.
Okay, fine. I'll work on my Josh impression.
Work on it. Catch you guys in the next one.